This is Back to Back.
Yo, what's up, back-to-backers? This is Willy Joy. Welcome to the show. Oh man, I almost burped when I said show. I guess I could go back and re-record that, but I don't know. We're already here. You already heard it. You know me. You know the deal. You know you get the raw, uncut burps here on Back to Back. What the fuck am I talking about? I've got Chad Kenney from Brownies and Lemonade on the show today. I had such a good time talking to him. He's such an interesting guy. And Chad is the creative director of Brownies and Lemonade. And if you've just heard that name before, let me tell you, Brownies and Lemonade is actually a collective of 7 different people. Not only Chad, the creative director, but also Kush, Jose, Dan, Alai, Evan, and Ben. And that's a lot of people. Shout out to all of them. And of course, it would have been so complicated to try to get all of them in on this conversation. Maybe we'll do a part 2, like a panel thing later on. But once we get into this episode, I think you're going to figure out pretty quickly, Chad's pretty capable of holding it down all on his own. Chad's an LA native. He's been working in the LA electronic scene for over 10 years now. He also DJs under the name Gojira. You might see him anytime you see the Brownies and Lemonade All-Stars on the bill. You might just see Chad popping up there. And look, it's really hard to overstate just how influential Brownies and Lemonade have been in the past couple years to the electronic music scene. They started from really humble beginnings. They've grown it to kind of a crazy point, and it's still getting bigger and bigger. There's a lot of great perspective in this conversation, and we'll get into it in just a minute. Oh, and before I forget, I'm going to put a link in the description of this episode so you can keep up with everything that Brownies and Lemonade is doing. All right? Back to Back is brought to you today by my friends over at Serato. And I'm here to tell you about the brand new Serato Studio that they just released. This is for all my producers out there. Listen up. Serato Studio, it's a brand new beat-making software. And if you want to get in on the ground floor of some software that has huge potential, listen up. Serato Studio helps simplify the path to music production. It helps keep the creativity flowing and helps eliminate all the annoying technical roadblocks that slows down the production process. And if you've ever sat in front of a computer for an hour just banging your head against the wall trying to make something, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Serato has used their years of expertise in the DJ game to make a really fast, efficient, and fun piece of software. It comes equipped with tons of built-in loops, effects. They've got their amazing pitch and time algorithm so you can really play around with samples in an intuitive way. And speaking of samples, there's tons of sample packs available, including packs from some of your favorite artists like Just Blaze and Flostradamus. And if that isn't enough, right now, if you go to Serato.com/studio, pick up a copy of Serato Studio and enter code WillyJoy2 at checkout, you will get 2 free months of Serato Studio. No obligation, no trickery. Just enter code WillyJoy2 at checkout and you will get 2 free months to try out Serato Studio. That's a crazy deal. You're not going to find that anywhere else. That's only available to listeners of this podcast. So go check them out right now. Serato.com/studio. Enter code WillyJoy2 at checkout. All right. So for this conversation with Chad Kenney of Brownies and Lemonade, we actually met up at my manager's office out in Los Angeles to go do this. You know, it just happened to be kind of the one time that was available for us to connect the last time I was out there. It was a beautiful day. We were looking out at a really nice pool, and then beyond that, just the hills of Los Angeles, man. It was a nice vibe. And honestly, this was my favorite kind of episode to do. We just connected immediately right off the bat. I didn't look at my notes once. We were just off to the the races. And I think anyone who's even kind of vaguely interested in electronic music knows the name Brownies and Lemonade by now. But beyond that, Chad is just a really impressive guy. His own story was really inspirational. And I think it's kind of rare that you get to hear from somebody who's so involved with shaping the current culture, what's happening right now in electronic music. I love talking to him. We had a lot of laughs. I really hope everybody out there enjoys this episode. If you do, and if you want to support this show so I can keep making awesome content like this for you guys, the best way you can support Back to Back is just by helping us spread the word. We're a small team. We work a lot. We don't really pay for advertising. So I want to see those posts, man. Tag me in your stories. Put up a tweet. Let people know you're listening. If you have a good friend who just loves music as much as you do, just let them know what we're doing over here. I'm at Willy Joy on all social media. The show is at Back to Back Pod. And that's the best way that I get to connect with all of you out there, to meet everybody who's tuning in, which I love to do. I'm always going to be replying to you guys, talking to you, reposting whatever you're putting up there. And I'm really excited to see what you think of this episode. Before I forget, you can also email me, backtobackpod@gmail.com, for all your thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, life advice, dating profiles, whatever you want to send me. It's all good. But right now, I want to get into this. I love this episode. This is me and Chad Kenney from Brownies and Lemonade, back to back. Let's go. It's tough because you do so much, and it seems like there's so many things happening all the time.
Right.
Does it feel that way to you? Because I think you've done a great job with the sort of public-facing brand of it, that this is a hive of activity. It's always happening. You always have to pay attention so you don't miss the new whatever, the new event, the new artist, whoever it is.
Right. Does
it feel that hectic to you?
You know what? It definitely has felt hectic at times. When we first started out, a lot of it was operating within the boundaries of the normal LA promoter, what have you. A lot of it was these underground warehouse parties, things within, within reason and within our reach, so booking a lot of these up and coming talents was all we were able to do. And putting the shows together was like one show a month or two shows a month. That seemed like a task. And then around 2016, we got into this mode where it's like, okay, we're going to do an event every weekend, and that every week there's going to be something that we are going to be able to point to. There's going to be a few different things on the social media per day that people are going to be able to engage with. There's going to be something that we're going to be focused on. And then it just was like, when you get in that mode, it really doesn't. It's almost like when you're in high school, you have a lot of extracurricular activities, you play sports and you're part of different clubs. So you're able to get your homework done for some reason. It seems like the busier you are,
right,
the more you can get done. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're not doing anything, doing one thing seems really difficult.
Yeah, that's so funny that you say that, because that's absolutely true. I was just talking to someone about how the busier I get, sometimes the better I feel, which is maybe a sickness, but it's like, but it's true. I feel like I'm able to work better when there's more stuff.
Yes. Yeah, no, totally. And that's why we seem to have found some sort of chaos that worked for us. But at the end of the day, it was really lightning in a bottle that we had sort of captured, and it was maintaining that momentum. Because like my whole thing that I tell people is that you can't go off of like the success or failure of your last event to be some sort of indication of where you are. Because if the event was really great, I mean, you better have another thing planned, or else you're going to lose. You're going to miss out on that opportunity. The iron is not going to stay hot. And then it's going to you're going to fade back into that level of where you were prior to that. And on the other hand, if the event was a complete failure, subjectively or whatever, you can build upon that. You can only go up from there. So I think you really got to have a short attention span and short memory. With some like worrying about where you are right now.
Sure. Yeah. And maybe being busier helps with that, right?
It does.
Because there's always something new to focus the attention on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like answer your question fully, it's been hectic at times when you have like, 5 different events on the back burner that you're kind of putting together at once. But I do think that to some degree, like we didn't really plan out the way that like, the different aspects of Brownies Lemonade have kind of permeated. We just go off of kind of things that we see doing well. Certain events do better than others. Certain kinds of tweets or certain kind of artists resonate more than others. And we kind of just go with that.
Yeah. How many events per week on average are you doing now?
Well, actually, we've slowed down a little bit, but, for 3 years, we were doing 1 to 2 events per week and at a different venue every time.
Right. And sometimes not even in the same city, right?
No. Yeah. That was one of the things around 2017 and 18, 19 that we started to pick up was a lot of out of town stuff. We wanted to make sure we had at least one thing going on every week. So, it could be some sort of like festival stage or after party. It could be some co-promotion for an artist that was doing a local show, or just like one of our, tentpole events. So we wanted to have that kind of variety because, I have immense respect for people who do a weekly or, do something that's a series. Cause like, that's kind of like where I came from as a promoter as well. But it just for this brand in particular, it just didn't seem sort of congruent to what we were trying to do.
Yeah, well, and I think it makes your business and the brand in general a lot more nimble in that you're not tied to a specific location or a specific sound or crowd even. It's you can kind of morph it to fit in with whatever the situation is.
Yeah, totally. I mean, having that be malleable is just been the most, invaluable thing for us because it does keep it like, oh, well, like, what are they going to do next? Like, who's going to be there? Like, what's this venue, But at the same time, it when it's so open-ended, you have to kind of like figure out, okay, like, what are we actually, what do we have control over? Like, what like one of the things that we've discovered this far into what we've been doing is like, we don't have a lot of IP, we don't have a lot of like we're not a record label. We don't do a ton of video content. We're not like some of these other music brands where it's like they're so reliant on the YouTube, so on and so forth. It really is like the essence of the events. But if you're not anywhere near the event, so how do you understand what Brownies Lemonade is? So that's kind of the next chapter of what we're trying to do is really kind of communicate that better.
Interesting. Are you, just in general, as the events have grown, as there's more eyes on you, I'm sure the team has had to grow as well. How do you go about, growing safely and making sure that in that growth you don't sort of lose the core of the ideals that attracted people to you in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. Like, I think a lot of it still comes down to the artists. The thing that really kind of we became known for and was a watershed breakthrough for us was when we started to become recognized as tastemakers and having a pulse on what the next wave of cutting edge electronic music was going to look like and what it's going to sound like.
Was that a moment? Like, did you notice when that happened?
Yeah, it definitely. So around 2014, we started to be booking shows primarily with DJs. Before that, Brownies Lemonade really kind of operated more in like this hip hop kind of like day party, very like local flavor kind of vibe. But when I came on board in 2013, 14, we started to kind of pivot a little bit more towards this emerging SoundCloud scene that had really started to take shape. A lot of the stuff was like Jersey club vibes and like, inspired by Live for the Funk and certain blogs and certain collectives that were really popping up. But a lot of this stuff hadn't translated to live space. So in Los Angeles, we were some of the first people to reach out to Moving Castle or some of these Jersey club guys or some of these weird kind of European dudes like Ritum Clubbin and 813 and guys like this. We're bringing them to LA.
Right.
And we weren't even sure if there was a crowd there, but there was. It wasn't sizable. But sure enough, some of these guys like, Louis the Child, Jai Wolf, Ikali, Sam Gelliatry, Sean Wasabi, so on and so forth, started to really have moments. And as they started to tour, get signed with major agencies, have these breakthrough songs, people started to look back at this kind of like this I guess it was a catalyst, this moment of when they started to pick up and they're like, oh, these guys, Brownies and Lemonade, there's this pattern. Like they keep booking these people that sort of keep, go on and do bigger things. So we kind of indirectly became like an agency showcase and kind of like, bigger DJs started to come through and hop on the decks. But it really was like 2016. We did this like really open-ended party in an art gallery and Miha wanted to come through and do a secret set, and out of nowhere, like Skrillex also came through.
Right.
And that story has been hashed out a lot of times, but that was really like that was like a moment, and it started to seem like everything that we were doing had some greater meaning as far, like, at least for these artists in their lives.
Sure, of course. And one thing you touched on in there that is one of the more fascinating parts about what you guys do to me is that you've always been champions of, the underground, quote unquote, or these smaller artists that maybe you've discovered before other people have discovered. But you have this really great track record of actually sort of picking either, I don't know if it's a chicken or an egg thing, but, picking these artists that do end up to go on to be big names. And it's an interesting thing because I think what happens most of the time is either you're all about these underground, underappreciated sounds and you try to be a voice for them, but it doesn't break into a bigger audience, right? And you just kind of, you're the person, you get it, but it doesn't translate. Or at a certain point, you decide, well, this isn't going to work with this underground sound. I need to change what I'm doing in order to see some bigger success for myself.
Right.
And somehow you guys have had this great track record of doing both and kind of threading the needle. And I wonder if you attribute that to anything. Is it just you have a good ear? Is it that you are in the right place at the right time? Is it something, is it your background? Is it some combination of skill sets?
Well, that's interesting that you say that. I think that dichotomy is pretty interesting. I think there are definitely some scenes that we really invested in and really believed in and thought would have bigger moments, I think, in the lexicon or like, I don't know, the mainstream scene or whatever you want to call it. And it didn't quite get there, but that doesn't take away from like that movement. Trap music was something that we're very associated with, and that has had like a global impact.
Yes.
So, at first a lot of people wanted to label us as a trap party, which was like kind of like dismissive. But ultimately trap has now become so ubiquitous and is merged in all these different kinds of global sounds and whatever that like being associated with that is like being associated with like, oh, you do electronic music or you do, it's like, it's part of all kinds of music now.
Yeah.
So it really isn't such a negative connotation, I think, as those people intended it to be. But like, there's definitely times where there's things that we really see having immense potential, and it's music. It's subjective. So it's like, you really, you can believe in it and put as much, weight behind it as possible. But things change. These are human beings. These are personalities. These are the people themselves who consume the music change.
Right.
Some of these scenes only have a 1 to 3 year lifespan. And then like by the time, I see it a lot of times where kids start coming to our shows at 17 or like 18, 19 years old. I hope 17-year-old kids don't come. I have no control over that.
Stay-at-home kids.
Yes. But by the time they're like 21, 22, a lot of these kids are burnt out or like they've been going out a lot. They're so exposed in LA to like incredible music whenever they want. They don't even make it into their mid-20s like at that clip. They're probably going to like hard ticket shows now or like a concert or like a festival every now and then.
Or they drop out of being excited about music entirely.
Exactly. Well, because it is true in that sense where music, at least as part of a personality or, for me, I'll speak for myself and say like music was always tied to my identity.
Yeah.
And when you're young, especially, it's like you can be bleeding heart about so many of these artists, and their trajectory or like their decision making is some sort of representative of you.
Oh, absolutely.
And we see that a lot at Brownies and Lemonade, which is like a beautiful thing. But the window for which a lot of these people do have that, time and ability and energy to really immerse themselves in it is very short. So we've seen that in a way like there's all these different kind of layers to it. But I mean, for the most part, we try to stay current, but we also try to stick with and invest in the people that were with us from day one. And that we just think like, no matter if it's popping off or not, like the music is really what it is the focal point, and people trust us in that, and that's really what we need to always maintain, because that's the like sort of the essence of what we are.
And you mentioned, like, first off, being called a trap party or people trying to associate you with one sound or another. But one thing that has stuck out to me just from watching what you're doing from afar is there is sort of a sense of history to what you guys do. Whereas I look at a lot of promoters or a lot of event companies, and it's very much, it feels very transactional. It's kind of like who's hot at right now that will sell X amount of tickets for X amount of dollars, and not so much about the community of it or what came before it, that kind of thing. So it's always interesting to me to see you guys. Like, I saw you through like a trap night a while back. That was, you know, sort of like the roots of it.
Trap history, yeah.
Sure, yeah.
It was specifically the 2011 to 2013 trap era.
Right.
It could not be more specific.
Which, I love how nerdy that is. But
yeah.
But it's cool to me to see that you do also sort of look back, and I don't want to be putting words in your mouth, but it seems like you do have this young audience, and you are saying, hey, not only is this cool right now, but this came from that, which was cool back in the day, and we're also going to show you that.
Well, I think that's really, nice of you to say. I think it's kind of like our responsibility in a sense to kind of pay homage and make sure that this kind of stuff is cataloged and remembered, because you start to when you become like sort of a pillar of the community in whatever sense, like you still need to, I think, give credit to the people that helped you. And when we first started booking this trap stuff in the moment, these guys were like beyond reach. Like we couldn't even, like an agency wouldn't even let us, book like one of their smallest acts at the time. Like we would have a $250 budget. Like these people look at us like, are you kidding? But we were able to get with $250 and maybe a flight, get one of these SoundCloud kids to come stay on, Cush's couch or at my parents' house.
Yeah.
And like, that's where we built like these strong friendships. But it's funny now seeing it come full circle when we're doing trap history. We have Me Too, we have Uzi, we have, Salva, we have all these guys that like at that time, were kind of like off doing their own thing and just like, rising on these festival lineups. And as we were kind of carving out our own lane in the scene, and now we all kind of come back at this intersection where it's like, they're excited to like be bringing this kind of stuff back to this young crowd that should know about it. Bauer,
right?
To us is like this pinnacle of that scene at that time, and like he's getting to really play the hits in the same way like a classic rock night at some sort of, but not like the same idea.
Yeah, I mean it's weird to think, but that does actually exist now. There are classic hits for a scene that's not even that old.
Yeah,
it's really weird.
Well, because I think back in the day, things used to be defined more as like in eras or whatever. So it would be like a decade.
Yeah.
We can kind of encapsulate the 70s and the 80s into a decade. And then it started to become a little bit more like, well, every few years there's a scene. Now it's literally like month to month, day to day.
Absolutely.
Things are changing so fast. So, it's this interesting relationship that young people have now with history, because like they have all of it at their disposal at all times, but there's no like encouragement to specifically check out 2011 to 2014 era SoundCloud, when everything that is happening is just like condensed into like, oh, well, what's happening this Friday? What's happening next Music Friday?
Yeah.
What's happening? It's like,
well, there's just
no need.
So much more stuff now too. Yeah. It's overwhelming.
And it's all good.
Right.
See,
that's the other problem.
I'm not one of those people that's going to, be like a Clint Eastwood, get off my lawn type with this electronic scene, because the thing is the music is still good.
Yeah.
But the problem is that, when everything is so good and is so calculated to fit into these certain lanes, then what is great or what is authentic? What's unique? What's going to stand the test of time? And I think these things are a little less defined as they used to be, because everyone is sort of, there was this like interesting change. Everyone always talked about the EDM bubble bursting. I first got into it in 2007 when I was a freshman in college. I saw Daft Punk live 2007. Then I followed Justice on the Cross tour, and I was very immersed in like the electro, blog house scene. And so I've been here since.
And you were in LA, right?
And I was in LA, yeah.
The heart of it.
It was great, and Hard was like the pinnacle of everything, and for me. And then now, 12 years later, working with them on all their events, we're doing Day of the Dead, we did Hard Summer, and just like these institutions kind of like passing the torch to us has been great. But I guess what I'm getting at is that a few years ago, I think that the bubble did burst, quote unquote, or at least the paradigm did shift enough where it's like now kids who are getting into the scene are like, there's such a high bar of entry that I think a lot of kids, before they've even accomplished anything, they already have a manager. They're already talking about hard ticket sales. Yeah. They're already talking about Spotify playlists. And it's like, yeah, that's all well and good, but like, what's the art? Like, what are you doing?
Right, exactly.
And that I think it's our responsibility to continue to have a showcase for people who are going to be subversive and push boundaries, because, like that's when the greatest art is created. Yeah. When all the major labels are like have their hands in like underground scenes, or everyone has a secret deal. Everyone is like, partnered up. That's when like the real creators are going to kind of rebel, and they're going to create the most amazing stuff, and we have to be sort of aware of that.
I mean, amen to that, man. I guess my question is then, from where you're sitting, everything is consolidating, everything is becoming about Spotify playlists. SoundCloud isn't doing so hot these days. How do you still find those artists that excite you?
Right. Well, I do think metrics are important, of course. Like, if something is gaining a considerable following on Spotify or on Twitter or on TikTok or whatever, you got to look at it. I mean, that's subjective numbers. To quantify something that is so open-ended, right? Like, we do look at like trends that are happening on Twitter and things like still avenues in which we've been using for years. But there was something about SoundCloud that kind of integrated this social sort of very vocal, very clear element of what people were engaging and reacting to that you can't emulate anywhere else right now. There's no live comments in Spotify. and I remember like when we're looking at SoundCloud, you'd see like the same 5 people commenting on every song, like Lippy Lemur and Camels and Igloos and Whipped Cream, who's like huge now. And Caroline, we love her, she's had this amazing trajectory, and it's like that kind of community aspect was so important and integrated into the selection of the kinds of people we wanted to work with, or the things that people were really gravitating towards. So
you would see, just so I understand, like you're saying you would see people sort of being active in the community as well as trying to promote their own stuff. Right. And that was an attitude you liked, that someone wasn't just out there trying to push themselves.
Well, I mean, it like everything kind of starts from this like very organic kind of genuine place, and I think then people figure out how to monetize it.
Of course.
So it's like the repost button was the biggest, in like it's the equivalent to the like button on Facebook. It changed everything. So when these like certain pockets of the music community were resharing things, and you'd be like, oh wow, like okay, they're associated with this person, and like this is really good, and then it opens up this whole nother lane. That was really important. Discovery and sharing and that social aspect was great, but unfortunately with Spotify and a lot of these places, you're kind of directed intentionally to what you need to see, or even if you're not cognizant of it. Like there's certain,
everything's an algorithm,
right? Yeah, there's certain orders to it. So I'm not discounting the worth of like it's just, that's the thing, is that's just how it is now.
Do you feel that it's gotten harder for you and you guys at Brownies and Lemonade in general to discover the underground? Did it used to be easier?
I don't think so, because I still look at SoundCloud and just kind of like in my career as an A&R, like I'm constantly like, looking for like the most like the edge of like in very early stages of what's happening. But the difference is that like certain things and certain people that I find on SoundCloud now that I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is like cutting edge, is so sick. There's no like indication on if like anyone is aware of it or like what like if they can DJ or like what anything. It's a little bit more
in the dark
a little bit. But I think that like for the most part, we still need to take risks and then book some of the stuff. And we have a few shows coming up that are going to be more showcase oriented and kind of harken back to our roots. And we've done that a few times this year. On my birthday, back in January, we booked like 5 up and coming artists in an open aux capacity, and all those people are touring now. So it's like great.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But we need to continue to do that. It just gets really difficult when Brownies Lemonade itself is kind of like we're doing a 5,000 person show at the Shrine.
Right.
Like you have to kind of like pause some of these other like auxiliary events you were doing in order to like focus on these bigger projects. So they have to kind of work in harmony. And the best way to do it is continue to like pull up like this kid on SoundCloud who has 5,000 to 6,000 followers, but we think they're stellar, and so just put them on the show and, then maybe get like a tried and true headliner on the night, and then like book out the rest of support with like this up and coming talent that no one is booking yet.
Yeah.
And we just got to do, but you have to kind of like, you kind of have to have a little bit of both,
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things in what you just said that are interesting. One that I was thinking about is, you mentioned the events are getting bigger and bigger, right? And there's more eyes on you, and you're not necessarily the underdogs anymore.
Right.
So I have to imagine you're also now just getting inundated with artists who want you to discover them, right?
Right. And then also you're inundated with certain people within, these higher tiers of the industry per se that are like asking you to do promotion on this or get my other artists on these events. And it's, you really want to help navigate and foster those relationships. But at the end of the day, we've stayed true to like, hey, if this artist doesn't fit, we're not going to book it. Like it's just, and it goes back to something you were saying about, so how do we separate ourselves from every other major market EDM promoter? And I would even say we're not EDM promoters.
Right.
This is just kind of like what we've been kind of, associated with or pushed into as we've continued to get bigger. But how do we separate ourselves from any other major market promoter is, Los Angeles is the testing ground for whatever becomes relevant in the rest of the United States in terms of music and arguably the world. So because we have this wealth of artists and people always coming here for whatever reason, we still are able to take risks and we're able to get these people early on. And that's why we're just so fortunate, and we need to continue to do that. So that's where it becomes difficult though too, is because you're also like, well, we should be cognizant of like our numbers and like being able to sell more tickets and all this stuff. And like, that's all well and good, but in the future, everyone's just going to look back at like these waves, and just being on the, like, at the forefront of each of them is important. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do think you guys clearly have your own wave, but it does remind me of some of the older movements we were talking about, the blog house era, or, when all the French people started coming to LA, all of that. All of these are moments in time, and we can look back and kind of say, that was a moment, that was a scene, all of that. Are you guys aware that you are kind of doing that now? Is it something you consciously think about?
I think so. Like although I do have to say, like, I am someone who always thinks about the people that came before and that have given us opportunity. Hard is obviously someone I mentioned, and I can't think of a brand or a like sort of music entity that's in a position that like I haven't idolized more. that I have idolized more. What Gary was able to do by melding hip hop and electronic music and kind of keeping it more open ended in the EDM realm is kind of like always been like what we've tried to do. There's also the Do Over who we're friends with as well, and they've kind of like given us their blessing, but like just the LA community and like who you never know who's going to show up. I also used to be very frequent attendee at a show called Versus, which was thrown by Dancism and Gotta Dance Dirty in Santa Monica at the Central. And that kind of was a Brownies Unlimited of its time as well. Then there's all these other things, Dim Mak Tuesdays, and then also Dim Mak Sundays at Dre's.
Yeah.
the Avalon, which was electronic
Legendary.
music mecca for me.
Absolutely.
Being able to play in the Honey Lounge and the Jerry Lewis Room and eventually the main stage, like these were rites of passage.
Well, and that's another point we should make is that at a certain point you were a DJ as well. You
Right.
still are a DJ, but
Sure.
that was probably a bigger focus of yours.
Yeah,
at a
it
certain
was
point.
it's the primary reason why I do any of this.
Right.
But yeah, being a DJ and promoter, you look at all these things as not only the inspiration, the driving force, but as like the indicators of your career success. So it's like, of course, I think about those things and like kind of like our place and time in relation to them. But I know that we would be nothing without them. So like I try to really keep like that sense of, and we do too. I should say we, like my team, also like, that responsibility where it's like, we need to also continue to invest in the next generation. Don't sell out to some degree where it's like we're going to just book this thing because it's like going to sell X amount of tickets,
Right.
And that's something that we've definitely stayed true to, like, dubstep and like things a little bit more on that end are just not really us, so we don't really go towards that.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of people, like on the internet being like, well, why don't you book this guy? And like, why isn't this here? Well, it's like, well, I think that on a larger scale, people would be like, well, they're Brownies Lemonade. They should be booking this because they're electronic music.
Right.
But yeah.
But it's a culture fit too.
It's
right?
a culture fit, yeah. And I think you talk to anyone that, does something related, is a cultural brand or whatever, lifestyle brand, and that is the only thing you have. So if that's compromised, then it's like we might as well start selling, bricks and fire extinguishers and just go straight Supreme, because then it doesn't really matter. Whether it be like radio shows or, a record deal or certain kind of, opportunities that come up, we always have to go back and ask the question, like, is it us? And that question has been the most vital, compass for us.
Yeah.
It's so simple. You try to overthink it. It's like, well, maybe like we can kind of like justify it this way. But if you have to think about it that much, then it's probably not fit for you.
Yeah, that's a key right there. And I think you could apply that to so much more than just throwing events. That's anything anyone is trying to do creatively. If you're really just struggling to justify it to yourself, trying to force your way into something that doesn't feel right, pretty much across the board, it's going to hurt you in the end.
Oh, of course. And especially in this day and age, and I will say this, man, like, the fans are going to be the first to notice.
Yeah.
They see through bullshit, honestly. Like, my whole thing is that I'm of the opinion now that your fans in this day and age know just as much or more about your brand than you do, because they see it from a totally different lens. And the thing is whenever I engage with anyone who's a fan of Brownies Lemonade or myself or whatever, I talk to them on an eye-to-eye level, because their input and their feedback is just as valuable as any agent or manager or whatever. And so, I mean, I really do believe that. But, sometimes like really staying true to your roots can be there are a lot of voices, there are a lot of opinions, but you do have to take it all into consideration.
Yeah. Well, and, you had mentioned that you're still very much in the A&R mode. You can still feel confident that you can find, cool artists to spotlight. And it made me think about the different skill sets that you and your partners sort of bring to the table with Brownies and Lemonade. Like, what does each person, have a specified role? Like, what would you say your strengths are, your specialties in the team?
Well, so there's 7 of us. We all do various things. Most of us also have day jobs in addition to Brownies and Lemonade. Kushan, our director, pretty much handles everything top down, behind the scenes and kind of like social media and branding and marketing. And, I'm basically second in charge with him on the creative end, and we're just really bouncing ideas off each other day to day, and the rest of our team as well to some degree. But we've definitely hashed out the roles a lot more. Some of it be day of show stuff, some of it be on the marketing partnership end, some be purely operations or sponsorship, whatever.
Yeah.
So we had to divide it up a little bit more, given also the fact that a lot of us, can't live off of just Brownies and Lemonade, as and a lot of people know, like just events and throwing parties and whatever. It's
tough.
not,
it's tough business.
Yeah. And
you're always, probably not at this point, but for a long time. I mean, I threw parties back in the day. I mean, you're always one party away from being broke at a certain level, you know?
And we also reinvest back in the company. And we also haven't really raised the price of admission for the most part. Kept it like under $20 and $15 for every show.
Yeah.
So, and that's all well and good.
Right.
If cashing out in the music industry was the goal, then number one, I wouldn't have gotten electronic music.
Yeah. And
I wouldn't have gotten into throwing parties.
I always say that to everyone. If cashing out is the goal, don't go into the music industry.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a funny thing. A lot of people ask me, a lot of young kids are like, hey, I just want to get some advice on you about getting into events. And I was just like, yeah, don't.
Right.
That's the best advice.
Yeah.
Because it took me 10 years to move out of my parents' house and actually make a living off of it. So it's like, if you're willing to and I think about all the different ways in which that wouldn't have, it doesn't work out. And then I'm 30 living at home still.
Right. Yeah. I mean, back in the day, when you were first starting to get into the industry or just into music in general, how did you see yourself? Did you want to make it as a DJ? Did you look at yourself as a promoter? Like even before you linked up with Brownies and Lemonade?
Well, so basically for me, when I got really into the blog house scene, it was purely just DJing, and the biggest inspiration to me was DJ AM.
Yeah.
And then I really enjoyed what A-Track was doing with Fool's Gold, being able to meld hip hop and sort of that French scene and all that. So those guys were like the two biggest inspirations to me. So I kind of went for like the open format DJing stuff, which was just so open ended back then. It's like you're doing private events, frats, and then you're like basically tying shoelaces at clubs, it's just like terrible, so bad. And then, an opportunity came about where I was working on an electronic music project with, another producer in the scene, and then that kind of didn't work out. And so artistry started to kind of fade. I didn't really want to do production full time. It just wasn't really my strong suit. So I founded a record label called Shifty Rhythms. And then around the same time, I started doing Brownies and Lemonade on the event side. I was managing an artist by the name of Hex Cougar and this other guy, DZZ, and a couple other people. And, that's what I tell a lot of people who want to get into the music industry. It's like, you can have, specialization is super important. Don't get me wrong. If you go in being a studio engineer, you dedicate every single day of your life to that.
Yeah.
You can and will make a living if, you really, really put yourself in the right position. But, sometimes on the really creative ends, I want to be an artist, or I want to be a producer. I want to be whatever, X, Y, and Z. More forward facing and front facing, you have to also have other areas of expertise just in case that doesn't work out, because more times than not it won't.
Yeah.
So I want to do the DJing stuff in whatever capacity I could, but also did management, record label, events. So as things started to kind of pick up in certain degrees, I would kind of gravitate or spend more energy on that. So DJing kind of took a back seat, because it's I'm not going to play at Playhouse and wait for $100.
Were you more passionate about any one part than another, or was it more about just sort of finding a way, trying to find your place?
Well, I think that, yeah. I think that they all have their flaws. Management is just so taxing, and I thought I was good at it, but it's just dude, it's just so hard to, when, especially you're an artist and creative, to get someone you're working with on the same wavelength. You have certain expectations, and also the accountability of a manager. You have to be available and go above and beyond. And I will admit that there were some times with my life, my personal life, my tumultuous 20s, just boozing it up. I definitely was not putting in that amount of work, but it's also for all of these things, the work isn't laid out for you. You have to create it.
Yes. There's not much of a roadmap.
No.
And usually the people who are successful are the ones that wouldn't follow the map anyway, right?
Right. And so the structure is varied. So I lived with my parents mainly as just kind of buying myself some more time. I was running their business so I could upload to SoundCloud at 10 a.m. that day and be working on a poster for the events, and doing all this other stuff, the management and whatever. So I was putting pieces in play for eventually what would happen. So Brownies Lemonade did end up happening, and I realized, well, I'm really good at booking talent and also being an ambassador for kind of Brownies and Lemonade, or and A&R I felt like I was pretty good at because I can communicate ideas to artists, being an artist myself.
And you did end up working with A-Track over at Fool's Gold
I
for
did.
a bit, right?
Yeah, so that was like the coolest thing that probably ever happened to me is that he did in 2017 ask me to come and work at Fool's Gold, and it was kind of like this crazy moment for me where I couldn't believe that, my favorite record label, my favorite DJ, that it all kind of come into place and at the right time. And that was a really invaluable experience for me as well, because I really got to see how things work in that independent sense and, at that level.
Yeah, and they've been going for so long.
So long.
I mean, Fool's Gold 2 had a major impact on my life and my career in so many different ways. It's really crazy to think about, there's just those few pillars that you don't necessarily think about them every day, but then if they hadn't happened, the course of the whole thing would have changed.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I idolized Diplo and Skrillex and A-Track and Steve Aoki, and in some capacity I've worked with all of them. I when I was living at home, I was a design assistant at Teamwork for 6 months, and my desk was right next to Diplo's studio,
Right.
And, working for him, developing kind of some branding stuff or whatever. And then also working at Fool's Gold and A&R, being the first music creative they ever hired, and working with Nick and A-Track.
Well, and that's huge too, because Nick and A-Track, they have such a specific vision, you know?
And to be entrusted with that, I didn't take that lightly, and it was really serious for me. And I will forever be indebted to those guys for helping me. And then everything that's come thereafter is sort of informed by these people who have helped, obviously. Also Skrillex, kind of on the live side and in the LA scene, kind of giving us his blessing. These people don't understand. I mean, they do understand, but when you're in the position of the person that is being given these kinds of opportunities, they understand because it was once given to them.
Yeah.
And then now it goes back to what we were saying earlier. Now it's my responsibility to give that to some other people, because it's the lofty dreams I had for being a EDM DJ or whatever, I've not only achieved almost all of them, I've surpassed them.
Isn't that funny?
It's just amazing. It's so humbling in a way.
Absolutely. It's humbling, and it's, by diversifying and not dropping the ego, more or less, which is something I think any creative has to do at a certain point.
Right.
And just putting the energy out there, being part of the community, building it up the same way people built it up for you, then you accomplished all the stuff you wanted to do in the first place when it was more about you, and when I say you, I'm also just talking about myself.
No,
too.
of course. Yeah. And that's the interesting thing, is that I'm definitely in a whole new chapter of my life, totally different outlook, where, I started to think about it. It was last year we played Hard Summer on the harder stage, 2 p.m. There was no conflicts really. And, 10,000 people came out. It was my dream since 2008 to DJ Hard Summer. And there was not
so cool.
I don't think that there could have been a bigger set that would have been possible. And, after that, I came home and it was 5 a.m, and I was tossing and turning. I just couldn't sleep. And I was just thinking, was this the apex of my career? Was that it? But then you start to realize that it's not this tangential upward curve. And I guess I could be one of those people who looked at my career as okay, well, now we have to have a later set time. We have to have more people at the set. The name has to be bigger on the flyer. And you could do that. And the truth of the matter is that how long can you achieve that? And how long can you maintain that? The greatest thing that I could do is to continue to bring up a new generation of artists, or give my time to the community and really, speak on certain issues with my kind of, experience. And then I'm just more happy with that than I would be with bigger billing, because what comes with bigger billing is these kinds of problems that are unforeseen, and then it's are you ever going to be satisfied?
Yeah. And the answer is no, you'll never be satisfied.
No, but helping people from grassroots and just seeing things happen in these mysterious ways and just being a part of it. I don't know. The gratification there is endless.
Absolutely. And if I bring ego even back into it, if you want to talk about what has a bigger impact culturally, what lasts longer, I don't think it's, being at the the last person who plays on the stage. It's, having the stage, right?
Right. No, it's true. And
I think it's just a bigger impact.
Well, I will say there's a lot of different people I've talked to who are in different markets who were like, hey, we saw the Brownies Lemonade documentary and inspired us to start throwing parties. And I'm like, this is probably the biggest thing I could ever have, was a legacy or at least some influence on that, because it's like, for me, like my individual accolades and all this stuff, it's like, whatever. Like success is really a mindset. And it's really, for me, I feel like the most success you can have is by how many people that you can kind of impact and enrich. So like now, like, and it's always been this way. Whenever I get an email from someone and they're like asking me about like some advice or opportunity, I always respond, even if it's a no.
Yeah.
Just to let them know that I'm acknowledging that they exist.
Yeah, I do the same thing, man. And it takes a fair amount of time sometimes, but I'm right there with you. It's important to me to keep doing that.
And the other thing is like some kids hit me up, whether it be on Instagram DM or like, they approach the inquiry in a sort of way that I think someone with like the wrong information told them that they should handle it.
Yep.
And there's two ways of looking at it. One is like, I'm just going to ignore it because it's like, ugh. But then the other way I look at it, and this is what I end up doing, is like actually responding and be like, hey, by the way, in the future, maybe you shouldn't go about it this way. And like, I give them like very tangible, objective advice.
I love it.
And you know what? You think that people are gonna be like, yo, this guy's a fucking dick. Like, wow. But I would say almost every time people are like, thank you so much, dude. Like that meant a lot. Cause like no one is who else is gonna like actually sit down, and most of the time people will be like, oh yeah.
Well, sure. And if you think about, when we were kids and we were coming up and excited about getting into this, I didn't have anyone telling me, don't do these annoying things that you do all the time. Neither did I. I will tell you, I was like formulating the idea for like this radio show on SoundCloud. And I remember like, it was like super blueprinted. Like I didn't even have a name for it. I was just like, oh yeah, I get a bunch of DJs to do a radio mix. It was such an authentic, original idea. Right.
I'm being facetious. But anyway, so I showed up at the Avalon one night and like Chris White was there, and I had met him before, but I went up to him like, oh, Chris, hey, what's up, dude? Big fan. I don't know if you remember me, but you know what? I'm doing this radio show and I would love for you to be a part of it. And he looked at me, he was like, great. What's the name of the show? And I was like, gonna get back to you on that.
Yep.
But it's, you can't, obviously the enthusiasm and the unbridled joy and like the belief in something that you're doing is there. Like no one's going to just like discount you for that.
Yeah.
But I do think there needs to be some guidance into how to approach it. So, cause it's like, it's a business at the end of the day, you know. It's so weird because it isn't like, pleasure and friendship.
Well, we don't know
and
the difference anymore, right?
No, we don't.
Which is a problem in and of itself, but that's just kind of the life we chose.
Right. But I do think that at some point in time, like this is what I want to do more now, is just kind of like when I see the opportunity, try to help people out, because it's like, there needs to be more of that energy.
Sure.
And also like, for the most part, I don't know if there's like the forums where people are having these discussions. I mean, this podcast is a great one. And there's certain other people who I think are trying to really like get certain issues kind of discussed. But when it comes to DJing, it just like, it's so tied to escapism.
Right.
And so tied to like a flex and just like this.
Absolutely.
It's weird to like also have a forum where these things are discussed.
Yeah. Well, I was just about to bring something like that up, because I think one thing I know about you and Brownies and Lemonade is that you take a certain amount of pride in the range of people who come to your shows, the community of your crowd, super diverse people from different walks of life, different backgrounds, interests, etc. And that in EDM especially, that's not often the case. Mm-hmm. I mean, I talk a lot about how I get bummed out that, EDM's very white, it's very male, and often, especially big festival lineups, all that, much else isn't represented, right?
Sure.
And so I guess from your end, I mean, you guys are a diverse group of people, Brownies and Lemonade. How do you sort of actively try to curate, try to like encourage, more diversity in what you're doing and show that off to the people who come to your events?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, we do all come from different walks of life. Most of us are not white, but that wasn't really the complexion that you were seeing in EDM at that time, or still. When we first came out, there was a lot of minorities that we were booking and people of color and from marginalized groups, which was great. And there was really there was no quota on that. It was just like, that's a great thing about music, is that when you're listening to someone, like I've made this example before, but we book Jai Wolf, and when you're listening to his music, you don't know what he looks like. But then when you see, that he is like Asian American, Indian American, and has that representation, it's like your whole perception of like what you thought people from that walk of life are like, it just changes. And that's a great impact that music can have. So, obviously us wanting to put underrepresented people on stage is like a very important thing. But, at the end of the day, it does also come back to the merits of the music. And we do have that as like the first thing about what we book.
Of course.
But everything else is definitely considered as well. And we really try to make sure that we have, as many female talents as possible, like on our radar, and people from different areas of the country. And
I like it because it's physical proof defeating the shitty argument of that it's just all merit based. If there were better women artists, they'd be on the bills. It's like, no, that's like, it's a cultural issue, and the fact that you guys are able to put up really diverse lineups that do really well, and those artists go on to be successful. I always like that, just because it's irrefutable proof that no, they are out there, just not everyone is booking them.
Yeah. And the other thing is that like our fan base is so diverse. And that was the thing.
Where does that come from?
Well, it comes from the fact that SoCal in itself is like one of the greatest melting pots in the Western Hemisphere, and like I myself, coming from, I'm half Japanese, half Irish, and, Asian American, it's like, growing up, I felt sort of isolated in a weird sense. And, my DJ name is Gojira, which is Japanese. And like, I just thought a lot of things about what I was doing was like very non-conforming to like a Caucasian audience. So it always felt kind of fringe. But then like, as we started to kind of like gain a larger audience, a lot of these people are Asian American now. Like, I'd say more than half of our fans are Asian American kids from SoCal. And they like, see me doing what I'm doing as a point of pride. A lot of people have gotten into like, throwing events themselves or production or like, management because, the stigma is kind of changing, or like they're like telling their parents, hey, I'm not going to go to med school. I'm going to be a producer.
Yeah. Good job.
Which
dude.
is great. Yeah. Good job. I mean, that is brave. Like, to me, that is brave. That is going against like the intent of like your family and your culture. And so these are things that are changing. That contingency wasn't really that prominent like 8 to 10 years ago. There weren't a ton of SoCal Asian American kids going to these things. So things change, culture changes, the look of the scene changes. And that is something that I'm very, very cognizant of and continue to want to represent. But at the end of the day, again, it's still based on the merits of the music. And all the other things will fall into place, and I truly believe that. And you can go look back at our track record, and it's, indicative of that. So
yeah, and again, culture I feel like is changing right now. You were talking about how the EDM bubble burst, maybe, and that the nature of events is changing. Some festivals are contracting. Some artists are having to find new ways to stand out or to get attention. For Brownies and Lemonade, what do you see as kind of the future, either of what you're doing, like where do you want to take it? What are your goals? And also just what's happening around you,
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely
a big question, I know.
It's definitely a question that we ask ourselves a lot. I mean, one thing, we did this block party at the Shrine, sold 5,000 tickets, sold it out. It was incredible. The biggest event we've ever done to scale to date. And, we want to continue to have those kinds of larger events. But of course, going back into that discovery aspect is very important for me and development. Also being able to kind of have pieces of content or, be able to operate in other areas in which we haven't, normally, to really convey what's going on in the scene or people that we believe in or whatever.
Yeah.
And really translating that more globally.
Side.
Yeah, because that's kind of the common language now that everyone has is really, I mean, we're such visual creatures, you know, and that's, I mean, it has the most impact on the music industry.
It's true. I mean, I guess I'm curious, how big do you want to get? Like, what is the end goal?
Right.
Do you have an end goal?
Well, I mean, I think time will tell. There's no ceiling on it.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's any challenge that I would be sort of daunted by. But it also, again, as long as we don't lose the essence and it stays true to the ethos of what Brownies Lemonade is, which is for the fans and for the artists, the next wave, and just this cutting edge aspect. I mean, look, there's certain times where we're going to get these big opportunities and we're going to be operating on higher levels and still doing like these kinds of things that may not be completely in line with like our warehouse parties in LA and stuff.
Sure.
But know that most of the time we're operating with that same mindset,
Well, how do you see yourselves now? Because I think we mentioned, you are sort of looked at as industry power players now. You were, you were in that Billboard thing that's literally named industry power players.
Sure.
But, I think people look at you in a very legitimate light now.
Right.
And we talked about how you came from these underground roots. You were sort of the promoters that nobody would talk to because there were these big established promoters. Mm-hmm. Now you are a big established promoter to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. How do you see yourselves? Do you still feel like the underdog? Do you feel like you're a big company? Do you want to be in that light?
Well, no. I mean, I do still think that we're very, I don't even know what the maybe like mid-level or independent still. I mean, I would say we're independent. Like, there's no question about that. And
do you like that? You like that vibe, being in that position?
I love it.
Yeah.
I love Brownies Lemonade being, also like influenced by the community just as much as the people who run it. The problem with going into these higher, these higher tiers of operation is that there's certain people become involved that are going to have their investors, their quotas or whatever, their return, their ROI, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like
just more money, more pressure.
Right. Not to say like I don't know what the future holds, and business is always going to be a part of it to some degree, but I really do like where we're at as just maintaining the independence of what Brownies Lemonade represents and just for the fans, because at the end of the day, like you're gonna have like your major music festivals and you're gonna have like these larger than life experiences, and a lot of times we get to be a part of it, with like a small stage or an activation or an after party, which is great. That like within like this larger thing, there's like this nice little niche kind of experience that can also be had, or something that's a little off the beaten path. Like when we did Ultra, I mean, we had our own stage 2 years ago, and it just was like the only bass stage at Ultra the whole day, which is like crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy.
And that was a very bold booking for Ultra, and we're so grateful that they like gave us that opportunity to be at this gigantic global showcase for electronic music that we were represented there one day. But, at the same time, it's like, there's also the people who are just starting out who like, they can't barely get 50 people to an event, but they're like so stoked that like anyone's even coming.
Yeah.
That's what we were doing 5 years ago.
Yeah. That's still your mentality. I think once you've been in that mentality, you can always sort of put yourself back there,
Yeah. And I think there's a healthy medium in which we operate where we kind of tie both together.
Sure. Of course.
That's kind of like where I want to stay right now, and whatever happens in the future happens. And I don't really think about it. And like, the power players thing and what have you, like that's for like my parents.
Yeah.
They can show like my uncles and aunts like the magazine article and stuff, but like for me, like it doesn't influence like the decision making going forward. Like, we have to get back on that list. That I'm not thinking about it in that way.
Yeah, which goes back to what we were saying earlier about your own personal career, right? Is that you didn't get too tied to any one image of yourself or any one future. You sort of tried a bunch of different things, figured out what you were good at, found your people, your community, and it sounds like you're doing a similar thing with the events, right?
Yeah, well, it definitely happened as like a whole change of perspective. Like at the end of last year, like I got really, really jaded. And, it was kind of like a culmination of just going nonstop for all these years, the drinking, the partying, like kind of being intertwined with like the struggles and the climb. And I talk about this stuff a lot, too publicly because, it's just like picking and choosing like the right forums in which to discuss this stuff. But it's like, I just like hit a wall and I was kind of like ready to kind of give it up, even at like this very high point of our career. But ultimately, I took some time and I decided like, I was going to just kind of reset my expectation level, my core value system, and really abide by that. So, I stopped drinking altogether, and like on Sunday it's going to be 1 year.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it was kind of like not as much of a challenge as I thought it would be, but like just getting the ball rolling on that, like just took a little time. And, I started to get really kind of like defeatist about and nihilist about kind of like what the scene is, like the core values and like integrity.
For all of your intentions, it doesn't always feel like anyone else cares or is paying attention. At least, and I'm speaking for myself.
I mean, I will go on the record and say that like my relationship with pretty much like 75% of the people that reach out to me or operate with me is transactional. And I'm okay. I was allowing that to influence or like maybe like inform my opinion of myself or these people. I was like maybe getting hurt by that or feeling undervalued. But I totally realized that like, what, this is kind of like what comes with the territory, and that's okay. And like, I have the people that are most important to me, and my team is great. We're like best friends, I'm my family and stuff, and everything else is like kind of just comes with the territory, and I can't judge or be upset that like this is the nature of it, you know, and like that's okay.
Do you have an outside group, whether it's family or friends, who aren't involved in that? Because for me, that's what I needed. I had to find an outlet, a hobby, a group of friends that just had nothing to do with work. That was huge.
No, 100%. Yeah, I have a lot of that stuff.
Good.
Yeah, like I've been hanging out a lot with, friends from high school, and they really ground me. And I've been really active on Twitch, doing my gaming stuff, which I'm really into. And that.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, we can talk about that too. And then, I'm really involved in Buddhism and like my Japanese Buddhist community, and these kinds of things really grounded me, because I started to realize that like I could be as jaded as I want and kind of just call it and just be like, you know what, guys, I'm out. I'm done with this. But I think that the greatest thing that I could do for myself is institute some of the changes I want to see, the positive change in the music industry, and to whatever capacity. It's not like some self-serving crusade.
Sure.
But, like if it comes down to like having that conversation with someone, one of the things that's happened is kind of off the record. A lot of people reach out to me about sobriety, or they reach out to me about Buddhism or certain things. And I give them like, I'll get on the phone and we'll talk and we'll hash it out. And no, I won't tell anyone else about who they are, and keep it off the record. And I'm like, wow, well, maybe this is kind of like a purpose that I can have in addition to like the career aspect of it.
Absolutely. Because I mean, we're all scared, right? We all feel alone, especially in the music industry. Like even thinking about all of those transactional relationships you were talking about, probably a lot of the people on the other ends of those relationships felt similar to you, and it's this weird system that we all participate in because it just sort of self-perpetuates. But once you actually make those human connections, that is a way to affect change.
Of course. Yeah. It's interesting because like when I first got sober, I was like, man, I'm boring. Like I'm just like old and whatever. But I was still enjoying the shows again. I was really immersing myself in the music. I realized how many years I just sat backstage drinking and networking and talking to people about God knows what. Yeah. Just the same conversation in a different place. And so when I started to immerse myself more in like the show and stuff, I was just like, you know what? I'm content with like, my role here. I'm just working, and just like I get to talk to some fans, talk to some people, enjoy, and I leave. But I started to kind of be like a little self-conscious about it. But whenever like people are always telling you, man, you guys are killing it, it's like the weirdest compliment to be given, because it means that you weren't killing it beforehand, and it remains to be seen if you will continue to kill it. So what ended up happening is like a few people who I really admire, who are very successful in this industry, have reached out to me about my sobriety and said that they were really proud of me, and like that someone that they love were in recovery, or they were themselves. And it was like the greatest thing to have heard that it was like my own personal character that was being recognized and not like the hype level of what we're doing.
Right.
And not to like that stuff really is important too to some degree, but
you're absolutely right on, man. And it's funny with the like, oh, you're killing it thing too, because that I always hear that and think that it's the person saying it that's really like sort of projecting. Like a lot of the times, because if somebody says that to you and you don't feel like you're killing it that day, then you start feeling insecure, and the other person might just be saying it because they're insecure and want to like, sort of build this relationship with you. It's so weird.
It's a weird spiral. Honestly, like my whole outlook on this stuff has really changed and is really positive.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be on this other side of it. And not to say that you won't have your dips, but to be in this like very consistent, it might seem boring, but this like very consistent line of operation kind of straddling. It was really the highs and lows of this industry and going event to event, like kind of having to pull it together this week, and that was really what I couldn't do anymore.
And was it the Buddhist angle, the spiritual angle? Was that a big part of what helped you sort of come back feeling refreshed?
Yeah, well, it kind of was a byproduct of like that transition I was going through. I was just like, when I was getting clean, I was reading this manga by Osamu Tezuka, who's like the Walt Disney of manga. He did like Kim of the White Lion and Astro Boy, and he wrote this 3,000 page shoujo series about Buddha, and I was like, yo, this is clicking with me, know. And then my grandma was a devout Shin Buddhist. So
were you raised in Buddhism?
My grandma was a very devout Shin Buddhist. She lived to be 100, and she was the president of the San Jose Buddhist Church. But my mom and my dad were Christian, so really wasn't like immediately in the home, but it's in my roots. That was very helpful and grounding. I never thought I'd be someone that would be like quote unquote religious or spiritual and like do what I do. There's something like very ungodly about partying. But I don't think that anything is just so cut and dry. Like I don't think anything like, see, I operated in polarity for so long, black and white.
Of course.
You have your party and then like 5 days a week, like you're clean and you're working out. And it's like, that's not moderation.
Yeah.
That's
it's like
binging.
you shame yourself, you dirty yourself, then you spend a few days washing it off, then you do it again. Yeah.
Right. So like all of these things are, they're all a byproduct of this new mindset. But yeah, I mean, operating in the gray is very important. And like, I realized like for me, like the amount that we're expected to go out is so abnormal that no one my age would be able to do this without some sort of, like additional help. I mean, very few people, I should say. And that most people do it by drinking or, whatever. For me, my whole thing to establishing moderation was to go out the same amount, but just not drink.
Yeah, which is great, man.
You're still exhausted.
Oh yeah.
And like I thought that I would come home and it'd be 3 or 4 a.m. and I would just pass out, right? But the adrenaline is still going. Your ears are ringing, but even if you wear earplugs sometimes, you're just like, whoa, dude, like I need to like decompress, so.
Well, and spirituality can help with that too, and exercise and all that kind of stuff that you hear about when you're younger. I think it's one of those weird things where you can tell people a lot, but until you really go through the highs and lows and figure out the balance for yourself. I went through a very similar thing.
Okay, yeah.
Like I'm not sober. I do drink a little bit, but I have cut massively back, and I exercise all the time, which I never used to do. And it's much more what you were saying about these routines and this sort of steady lifestyle, and just balancing everything out.
No, it's true, because like honestly, like and like some of the core tenets in Buddhism, like mindfulness and gratitude and non-judgment and understanding that everything comes from people's self-centered views and ambitions. Like the truth of the matter is that yes, by nature, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter if you're in the DJ scene. It doesn't matter if you work at the post office. It doesn't matter if you are even doing charity work. You're in the Peace Corps. Everyone operates a certain way. We're human beings. This is our default nature. So the thing is like, it allowed me to at least in that sense be a little bit more patient with like the people around me. Even if some people see them as egomaniacs or having flaws, I really understand where they're coming from. And it allows me to be patient and allows me to operate in a way where I am not allowing my judgment to become, or my emotions to become the like driving force of my decision making, which I think in the long run will help, because so much of the emotional impulses are the reasons why bad things happen in this scene.
Absolutely.
And so for me personally, I'll speak in I statements. For me, I myself, it just grounded me. So I'm that's just where I'm at now, and things change. But
no, that's great, man. And I'm sure that kind of attitude probably helps out the business, probably helps lift the team up. It's anytime somebody comes in with a good mindset, I think that's just setting yourself up for success.
Absolutely. We all kind of operate as human beings in this just weird ways, like 3 to 5 year cycles. And I had hit the end of this like 3-year cycle of like throwing these parties nonstop, and it hit a breaking point. I mean, everything, it's just things happen in these patterns. So
I have to imagine the business was probably maturing along with you, right? Like I look at these projects, they're like children. They grow up, they have tantrums, they go through struggles. It's the same thing.
It's one of the reasons why I've maintained being single, is because it's like it's a baby. I feel with my team, we're like co-parenting, and that's enough for me right now in this time. Whatever happens in the future. Like I had this like weird preconceived notion of myself where I just thought, well, when I turn 30 or whatever, I'm just going to get out. I'm going to, do whatever. But it's not, again, nothing needs to be, there's no outcome that needs to be predetermined.
Right. Absolutely.
I think you feel a bit of guilt. When you start doing something like this as your like career ambition, a lot of people, and I know this from being creative my entire life, a lot of people kind of judge you in a way where it's like, oh, he wants to be an actor, he wants to be a DJ. They kind of don't really want you to succeed in a way. But they're like, oh, well, good luck, man. You're still promoting the parties.
Do you think that...
But what I was going to say is just when you finally make it, it's like this whole new tune. It's a complete 180.
Of course.
Everyone's like, oh, man, like I always knew you were going to do this. It's just like slapping you on the back. Yo, man, hey, do you think you help my cousin out with a job? Or it's like, hey, can I get AA with me and my girl at the show? And it's like you start to become a little... Some people, and for me, I will say, like, I got a little resentful. Like, like people are so fake.
Yeah.
But now I've started to realize it's like, you know what? Whatever. This is just the way that things present themselves. No one,
it's just the way humans are wired to a certain extent too, right?
Yeah, like you are pursuing a kind of frivolous, vain career to some extent. That doesn't mean that you're a bad person.
Right, exactly.
That doesn't mean that you can't contribute to the community.
Yeah.
It's just, it's not manifested itself in that way yet.
Yeah.
So people don't see it that way. They only see the intent of like, I want to be famous. They perceive it that way.
Right. Well, and it's so no one's ever going to be able to be inside your brain, right? This is another thing I tell people is that if you don't feel like your vision is connecting with people and you can't express what you want, nobody else believes in it.
Right.
It's one of two things. Either you're not doing it right, or if it's something you really believe, you have to do it yourself. And like, you just have to make them see it over time.
Exactly. Well, what's interesting is when I was first at Coachella, 2008, my first Coachella, I told my friends, I was like, yo, I'm going to DJ here one day. And they're like, okay, dude, your eye's a kite. And then, the struggles, like no one coming to the shows, living at home, being an alcoholic is like, it wasn't, there was no indication that was ever going to happen. Even my girlfriend at one point in time was just like, yo, you got to produce music. Everyone's like, you're never going to make it to these festivals if you don't produce music. But I just knew that there was something bigger that like I was working towards. I didn't know what it was yet.
Yeah.
And then I remember it was like in 2016, I went to Coachella with my best friend from college, and we were watching R.L. Grime, and I was kind of like, you know what, man? Kind of sucks that we never got to play Coachella, but I'm just like so grateful that I've even made it this far and I still have these people in my life and whatever. And the next year, sure enough, we played Brownies and Lemonade for over 4,000 people at 1:30 p.m.
Insane.
And at the Doolab, and like no one thought it was going to happen that way, but it's just like you have this vision, you keep going for it, and then just the things will manifest in these weird ways.
Yeah.
And so that was a really, like, I try to always tell people this. It's like, yeah, someone's going to say that like you can't do it because of this. Like there is no, I don't know. The limits are just being placed on you because of other people's insecurities.
Right, exactly. And you should never let other people's ideas of your limitations affect your own vision of yourself, right?
100%.
Which is easy to say and hard to do, but it's something I try to remind myself of all the time.
Oh, trust me, everything I'm saying, I hope that people listening to this understand that like it does sound very righteous or like I'm holier than thou or whatever. Honestly, it's like I literally there was no other option in my mind. Like this was the only thing that I was going to do. You have to be crazy in a way. You have to convince yourself of it. You have to like try to visually like manifest it through your, like every day has to be like, one step closer to that goal, and
right. Even if you don't know exactly what the goal is.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think too often in this day and age, people try to have it all like immediately.
Yeah.
And it's just like nothing that is going to be sort of, with a solid foundation is going to be built that quickly.
Absolutely. And we mentioned before we even started recording, you were telling me that your father is an actor and, has seen some success. Do you think his background like gave you that kind of confidence to see there are these sort of other roads you could go down? Do you think any of that, like growing up in that environment, gave you the confidence that, these crazy goals were attainable?
Oh, yeah, definitely. That 100%. Because like the thing is one of the reasons why Brownies and Lemonade is successful is because most of the people that are founders of it are from LA. So we understand the landscape.
Yeah.
And, a lot of us grew up around people in the entertainment industry, around people who were very successful. And so that aspect didn't faze me. And I started to see a lot of behind the scenes stuff that like the true meaning of success is stability, is sort of work ethic. It's not the cars, it's not certain indicators.
The awards, yeah.
That I think like, especially in the 2000s when I was growing up, materialism was at an all-time high pre-recession. And I think that sometimes like I was getting caught up in that. Like when I got accepted to UCLA for theater in the acting program, which was like one of the hardest programs to get into in the nation. And I immediately was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be famous.
Right.
No doubt about it in my mind.
Done
I was
deal.
watching Entourage at the time. Like this is the wrong moral compass to be following. But I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get my training. I'm going to book an agent. I'm going to get a pilot. I'm going to be famous. Like there was no question in my mind. Right. But my dad, it always told me like, I had these dreams. I think when halfway through the acting program, I got super jaded, super discouraged. And I was like, fuck this, and I wanted to move to Japan and I had like an offer to do modeling out there. Be a DJ is so random, but I wanted to do it.
I can see it, baby.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And my dad was like, you know what? I know you want to do that, but if you're able to make something in LA, then you can go there and you can do it. Ooh. But if you go out there, it'll be impossible to come back. And
that's a gem right there.
Yeah. And that was just from his own experiences, which was great. And, obviously when I talk about all this stuff, it's with a grain of salt because we're talking about the entertainment industry and it all seems so self-serving. But, like there was this intent and like, having it held down here in Los Angeles allowed us to go to Japan. And we did, and go to all these great places. So there is some truth to it. It's just like when you're young and you're creative and you're hot-headed and you have all these, ambitions, like it's really, really difficult to just be patient.
Yeah.
And just commit to a process. You have to fall in love with the process.
Sure, yeah.
And the process can be very brutal.
Well, and I was going to ask about, the Brownies and Lemonade early process too, right? Like, because if somebody just looked at the Brownies and Lemonade social media feed, it's, everything is crazy all the time, each event bigger than the last, that kind of thing. But I have to imagine when you first started throwing events, not only did you have, no connections, I would imagine booking agents didn't want to work with you, but also promoting is very competitive, right? And there were lots of established promoters in LA.
Yeah.
Did you get any pushback when you started, really kind of getting some heat behind you?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that there were some people that were very skeptical and were waiting to see if the hype would die down before they worked with us. I definitely think for a lot of people, they thought it was a fad.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't expect the work ethic to increase or the, I don't know, like we're just very lucky that like the people that were within our team were like super dedicated, because a lot of times what ends up happening is when you have that a little bit of initial success, a lot of people start to ask for more.
Of course.
They start to like, maybe get a little full of themselves. And we've been able to keep this level head as a unit. And that required like years of not making money on events.
Well, yeah, I mean, we should talk about that. The fact that, because of course, I say this all the time. There's this thing about, it takes 10 years to make an overnight success.
Exactly.
And I have to imagine, probably for years of your events, you guys were losing money, breaking even maybe, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And One particular event stands out for me. It was in 2013. We had this daytime party called Camp Troll. We actually did one last week at the W Hotel at the rooftop pool, which was kind of interesting. It was a very, very big step for that party.
Nice.
But, Camp Troll is very influenced by the do-over, daytime, outdoor hip-hop vibes. And we were doing it at this restaurant in Little Tokyo called Senor Fish. It does not exist anymore.
Actually, I went there back in the day.
Okay, it's been bulldozed.
Yeah.
But we threw a daytime party there, and we were so excited about it. We had Jemba on the lineup, Spaz Kid, now known as Mark Rodito, Thurs, very big rapper.
Yeah.
The opener at 2 p.m. during the taco happy hour was Slander, this group from Orange County, playing Festival Trap at 2 p.m. for 4 people.
Right.
It's just really interesting. When I was talking about waves, I think that at some that in particular was something that we're yes, we believed in all this music. We were way too far ahead.
Sure.
No, and it was very eclectic. People didn't know what they were really getting into or what we were doing, And so it was tough. And even the people around me, I remember I invited a few people to come check out the event. And they're this what? It's humiliating.
Do you think the times caught up to you, or do you think you figured out a better, more accessible way to present it?
I think that just, life in is 95% timing or more.
Yeah.
And I think that at first the timing was kind of maybe we're a little too ahead. And then somehow the stars aligned and we hit this perfect wave, right? In 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
Where all the people that we started to really invest in really did well for themselves. And a lot of the ideas that we were kind of putting into motion were resonating with people. And, we're only as good as the people that have helped us and come to our events and work with us. There's no which way about it. We do not put ourselves on some sort of elevated plane of existence.
Course.
So yeah, it's all a community kind of group project. And people see, that's the thing is I noticed on Reddit and a few other forums where people are they're questioning how close we are with these people. There's no way that you guys are all buddy
right.
with these people, but it really truly is that way. And I understand how disingenuous it must seem to some people who aren't involved behind the scenes or don't come to these very personal kind of gatherings that we are invited to with these artists and stuff. It does seem like it's this angle that we're using as a
marketing,
promotional
right?
tactic.
Yeah.
But no, we're really trying to, and all the artists will stand by it, and that's why we're so fortunate. I was at Skrillex's birthday party with less than 40 people. These are the 40 people, closest people in his life. The fact that we're there is great. And it's nothing. It's not a feather in my cap.
No,
it's just
no.
it's cool. I don't take it lightly.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
I can't even believe that I could call some of these people mentors and be able to rely on them or ask for advice. And that's something that's great. But now I think it's again my turn to kind of help be that for some people. And I think that mentorship and stuff is kind of not really present in the culture, and 100%. Also paying homage to the people before you.
Yeah. Well, and I think now, we're talking about timing. I think you are at the point now where you can set the tempo a little bit. And with that in mind, what are you excited about right now? What do you have going on? Something coming up, whether it's an event or mentorship or just even a project that doesn't exist yet and an idea you had. What's exciting to you right now?
Well, believe it or not, I actually, I am really excited about a lot of these kids on SoundCloud that are coming up.
Yeah.
And there's a handful of them that we're going to be working with soon. So I'm really excited about that. Don't want to spoil it, but
sure.
We are going to get back into more of that grassroots aspect. So that's great. I really want to continue to really, reach out to people in that community or who are making bass music or really cutting edge kind of stuff. Even if it doesn't have the Spotify streams or whatever, I believe in it. My team believes in it. And we really want to continue to do that. I really enjoy gaming and as we mentioned, Twitch stuff. And I really am excited about the cross pollination between gaming and music and where that's going to develop.
Yeah, there's been a couple weird false starts with that, I feel like.
I don't think that anyone's figured it out yet.
I don't think so either.
And I think that it also ties back into the sense where it's a lot of the people who come to Brownies and Lemonade, they're really into fandom as well in other areas on just whether it be manga and anime and, video games and whatever, media. But music is kind of this, this constant that flows in between all of these scenes. But, to really sort of be impactful in this intersection is to really appeal to the gamers. And I think that you have to understand it from the gaming perspective,
Yeah.
I think that's what the missed opportunity with a lot of these things is that the people who are like doing these big corporate activations or these DJs who are trying to kind of get their foot in the door or like, cement themselves in these lanes, like they aren't really
right.
the
yeah,
figures.
It's the same as anything else. You have to participate in a culture to be able to contribute to it or to take anything from it.
Yeah, and
right?
I don't think playing Fortnite just like, like very casually is enough.
Right, exactly. Or, just like seeing that, people are playing a show on Minecraft and then telling your agent, I want to do that.
Right.
It's like that's not the way it works.
Right, but then people that are doing these things like the Minecraft concerts.
Yeah, I'm not talking shit about them. Those are cool.
I was going to give them a lot of credit.
Yeah, they're great.
I think that there's parallels to Brownies and Lemonade. And different underground kind of movements like that, but they're just presenting themselves in different spaces, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And, I think the virtual concert aspect, I think being able to connect in these other areas without having to physically be in a space is great, because not everyone is really that outgoing. And I think I think in 2019, we're becoming a lot more considerate and sort of, I would say sort of empathetic to people who, don't feel comfortable socializing or raging or go to a concert. There have to be other experiences.
Yeah, I love that, man.
So yeah, hopefully we can kind of also provide that.
Yeah, that's a different kind of diversity. I like that.
Yeah.
It's a good way to think about it. Is there anything else we haven't covered? Anything else that's on your mind that you want to get out there before we wrap this up?
That was pretty good,
yeah,
man.
I think we did all right.
Feel like,
you feel good?
Yeah, we went as deep as, the Buddhism, and then, we came back up to talking about, free with RSVP. Now, I honestly, I think, ultimately, there is no like sort of predetermined outcome for what we want to do, but we're just very happy and always very grateful for what we've been able to do. And, we hope to continue to have that kind of impact. But I think that it really comes down to like being really mindful of the people that are around you and just where everything is headed.
That's what it's all about, man. I love that.
But I think I am very optimistic, I will say.
I can tell, man. I feel it. It's good.
Because I do see a lot of like kind of like I do see some people kind of a little negative on the DJ stuff now.
Sure, yeah.
And a little like, it's not getting streams and like, blah, blah, blah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Certain things aren't happening, to the way that they used to.
Yeah,
but I think that there is going to be like this great next chapter, and it's really up to us to kind of write it, or like just us in the scene, like the collective we.
Yeah, anyone, you and me and everybody listening, man.
Yeah. So I appreciate you bringing me on here and being able to kind of discuss some of these things that I don't know if like I see it very often on my Twitter feed. I see a lot of, if you a DJ, you single to me, and I love that stuff too.
Of course. But you guys are great at that. I mean, the meme stuff, the hype stuff, like I feel like that's a specialty of your guys.
Sure. Yeah. I can't take a lot of credit for it. I don't think I'm that creative in that way, but yeah, it's all relative.
Yeah. Well, I'll end it just by asking the same question I ask at the end of each episode. A simple question. You don't have to think about it very hard. Just looking for a memory, a time in your life, any time when kind of in a moment, music really meant something to you. Music really deeply affected you. Just kind of the first thing that pops into your head.
Yeah. This is just a very random
Those
moment.
Are the best.
Yeah. I always remember this strange moment when we were doing the Ausla 5-year anniversary party. It was at Les Jardins. Skrillex was performing with a bunch of DJs, What's So Not Bauer, Valentino Khan, Killanoise, all these people. And it was this great kind of, watershed moment for us again, and one of the best parties we've ever thrown. And Skrillex was up there DJing, and he played Sweet Shop by Dr. P, which is just like a classic, but I've never really been much of a dubstep guy, but I started to just get really emotional and almost cry because it like took me back to this moment when I was like in college, and I was like sitting on my bed in my apartment, and I was like, I remember the first time I heard that song, and I was like, yo, this song would be like really killer live. And I like, and I was just like, whoa, this is so cool. Like this kind of music, and just it was again one of these like full circle moments where I was like, wow, Skrillex is playing this at my party.
Right.
5-year anniversary, this song. And there's so many like hundreds of moments like that.
Of course.
But it's like kind of weird because a lot of times it'll just pass you by.
Yeah. And that's why we all keep coming back, right? Is music's ability to sort of immediately transport you into a memory or a feeling or, just a connection that's something a little deeper.
Yep.
The stuff that you can't really just explain.
It reminded me of the end of Ratatouille when Ego eats the ratatouille and he's like transported back to his childhood. It just and like that moment was insignificant, like that moment in me in my dorm. But it's weird how music is this great connection where it's like it's so visceral, it's so tied into emotions and feelings, and I think that like a lot of the stuff with the DJ when you are really struggling and climbing and trying to get there, people don't really understand how difficult that is. And when you do get to a point where you can be proud, you see a lot of these DJ milestones. And I think after a while, some people are like, oh God. But I look at every single one now and I'm like, yes,
right.
I totally get that. And I do think there's something to be said for that. So
yeah, man. I mean, we never celebrate the people and the achievements when they're here and when they're happening, right? It's always looking back. And so, no, I love it. Even if I see somebody, like patting themselves on the back for something in a way that I wouldn't necessarily do, I still think that's cool because that must be a good moment for them, Of
course.
And we could all use more of that.
We can.
Yeah.
And I think that now that we've had this discussion, it just, I hope some people listening to this really understand that like these are the things that will be really important in years to come.
Absolutely. Well, this has been really fun, man. Thanks for sitting down.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, man. Peace.
Peace.
All right, that's the show. Shout out to Chad. Shout out to Brownies and Lemonade. Shout out to you, the listener. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did recording it. I'm going to put a link in the description of this episode where you can keep up with everything that Brownies and Lemonade is doing. And also shout out to Serato, our sponsors for today. My name is Willy Joy. You can always reach out to me at Willy Joy or at Back to Back Pod on all social media, or you can hit me up directly. My email is backtobackpod@gmail.com. That's it for this week. Another episode in the can. I've been here in DC working on music, working on podcasts. I'm going to be back out in LA to record a bunch more in a few weeks. Until then, I hope you're having a good week. I hope you have a great weekend. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people around you. Have some fun this week. Do something you want to do. Don't do something you feel like you have to do. And I will talk to you next Tuesday. Until then, for Back to Back, this is Willy Joy. Peace.